And we have a quorum. All right, let's go ahead and get started. Welcome, everybody. I'm Deb White, the chair for the MATBUS Coordinating Committee. I call the meeting to order at 9 a.m. Let's start with our introductions. I'll start to my left with Julie. If you could just give your name and your affiliation.
Yes, Julie Baumelman, City of Fargo Transit Director.
Mike Reed's Assistant City Manager in Moorhead.
Vanessa Flanagan, City of Moorhead Finance Director.
In Griffith, Metro Cog. John Strand, City Commission Borough.
Sean Cole, Mobility Manager, MATBUS.
Matt Panotti, General Manager, Transdev.
Luke Whitner, Transit Planner, City of Fargo.
Cole Swinton, City of Fargo, Assistant Transit Director, Operations.
Ian McLean, Assistant City Attorney for Fargo.
Susan Johnson, Finance Director, City of Fargo.
Adam Altenberg, MetroCog.
Aiden Young, MetroCog.
Peyton Master with the City of Dilworth.
Great. And if we could just go to our screen and if each of you could just sort of take a turn unmuting and introducing yourself, that'd be great.
I'm Heidi Benke. I'm with Transit Operations Supervisor.
Sebastian McDougall, City of Moorhead.
Megan Zaradka, City of Moorhead.
Rich Stevens, NDSU Transportation Manager.
Dustin Scott, City Administrator, West Fargo.
Is there anyone that we missed, Adam? Okay, great. And I forgot to mention, I'm with the City of Moorhead City Council. Our first item on the agenda is approval of our agenda for today. I'm assuming everybody had a chance to read it. And so I will entertain a motion to approve the agenda for today's meeting.
This is Peyton. I'll make a motion to approve the agenda.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Moving on to number 2, the minutes for the March 19th meeting. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Okay. Is there a second?
Also,
Thank you. Here, is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Let's move on to our action items. Our first action item is we're continuing our discussion of the driver services and transition, and I'll turn things over to Julie and Cole.
thank you, Madam Chair. So we wanted to come back with what we have developed over the time between our last meeting and now, and we think we have a good proposal here. What we're proposing is that the staff transition, so this would be drivers and their management staff, would include the positions that are listed there. So it'd be 75 drivers, 6 senior drivers. And what we would do with senior drivers, we don't currently have those right now, but they would help with cadetting and behind the wheel training. So the expectation would be that they would get paid a differential for being senior drivers, and then they would take on those additional duties to help with the training requirements. 4 road supervisors, which is what we currently have now. The management staff would include an operations manager, fixed route operations supervisor, a safety training manager, and a training specialist. And the training specialist would work closely with the safety manager. There's a lot of things that cross over there that are important. 1 human resources position, we are working with the City of Fargo HR department to see how exactly that would look. We're at the point where we think it's probably an HR generalist, and that person would be similar to the accountant we hired last October, and they would work within the HR department in Fargo as well as in the transit department. So they would be able to bridge those operations. So temporary non-benefited positions, Transdev currently uses 12. We are proposing 6. Those are folks that wouldn't work full-time, but oftentimes they've been with us for a while and they want to drop down to part-time. So they do stand by, which is they come to work, they report, and if a driver calls in and isn't able to do their run for the day, then these drivers would pick up those duties. We looked at benefits, and based on the percentage of employees currently that have health insurance benefits through the city of Fargo, the HR department did an analysis on that recently. So we used their numbers that you can see there. So the projection is 12% would not take benefits, 44% would take single plans, 8% would be the single plan plus child, and 48% would be family plans. And just as a point of comparison right now, Trans Dev's benefits that they offer their drivers are, and not to speak poorly of them, but they are very expensive. Family plan for a month is about $1,400. And this would be significantly lower for the employee to afford. We did build in some overtime costs, which are unavoidable when you have an operation that's as intricate as the transit system. And then on the second page, then I know everybody's interested in the numbers. Well, some of you more than others probably, but the finance people just perked up. But so what we did was we looked at what contracted driver services would very likely cost because we would have to go back out for bids. There would be, and if TransDev was not successful in receiving the next contract, there would be startup costs. So we went back and looked at proposals from previous bidders on our last RFP process. Startup costs were about $330,000. So you want to account for that. You want to account for all the costs that actually go into having contracted driver services. Then we did an analysis on in-house drivers and demonstrated the difference. So bottom line, and you can stop me at any time and we can discuss what we're talking about here. The bottom line is overall, in what we're projecting coming in-house with drivers and some of their management staff, that the city and all the cities that are part of the partnership in this transit system would be about a $2.5 million reduction in cost that we would have by bringing them in-house. So you bet, jumping in, Mike.
Well, and so just so I understand, that difference is based on a projected increase based on bidding it out.
Yes, thank you, Mike. Yeah, we're projecting a 20 to 25% increase if you move forward with a contractor. So what we did, I think we brought those numbers forward where we looked at the history and the changes for each time we had to go back out.
So you're actually seeing you in the past, your past experience is
historically. It's and what the market is right now. In the past, there have been more companies in the business that bid on those projects. So TransDev, Halcon, there's a few others out there. Those have consolidated in a lot of cases, and there's very few.
There's less competition.
Yeah. Okay. There's very few out there now that would. So they can come in with a little bit more of an aggressive proposal, and the other costs. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, Susan. And when you're done, Susan.
Oh yeah. Some of the other costs that the cities would not see if we do not have a contract are performance bonds, which are part of the contract right now. And the intent of that is if for some reason the current contractor failed to perform, we could exercise that bond. Right. And in reality, doing that, I'm not exactly sure how successful that would be, but it is a cost.
Yes.
That's built into the proposal. Susan.
Of course, the same, but I was going to point out the proposed in-house, isn't that about the same as what the current cost is now.
But
There is a little bit of savings, right? Cool.
you said it's about, we're anticipating a 25% increase. So if we took 25% off of what you predicted,
It
we're
would be flat
to
to be about the same, so.
So if we're looking at year to year, just year to year.
So, yeah, and I
It's
didn't
about-
do the math, the difference between the in-house projection and the contractor projection, that in itself is about 25%. Yeah, I guess it would be.
Yes.
Yeah.
Roughly.
Mhm.
Yep, I want to say that our current contracts is about $8.1 million, so it'd be a slight decrease from what we're at this current year
Yeah.
into next year.
So we may actually see even a little bit of actual savings, not just less
just
than what we
flat,
anticipated in terms of. That's
Yeah.
nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Julie, I just want to make sure I understand. So last month, I think when we were looking at the numbers, the in-house cost was like 8.9 million or so, I think that you guys had on that spreadsheet. Was there, I mean, are we bringing in less?
So what we did compared to the last time was we had all the drivers, or when we brought it to you guys last time, we had all the drivers making approximately what they were at the time with TransDev. Going forward, we spoke to HR and found out that we're able to offer up to a step 5 within our pay scale system. So some of the wages did decrease there. We also removed one road supervisor position. There's a few other slight adjustments that we found to kind of consolidate things, like it was proposed that we had an office associate position that had been kind of consolidated with the requested HR position. So that's just that HR generalist now. So trying to find some efficiencies in there.
And I think the thought was if they're coming in at a lesser rate, our benefits are substantially cheaper and more benefit rich. So they'll actually be getting more, so to speak.
That's it.
Yeah. And yeah, all good questions. So please feel free to jump in, like I said. Some of the efficiencies, building a little bit on what Cole was talking about, and what we did look at is currently the drivers for TransDev are Teamsters. That agreement is between TransDev and the Teamsters. The cities are not a part of that agreement, so that restriction would be lifted. It just expires at the end of this year. So we would be able to do a lot more with the scheduling, and we've already been working pretty in depth on the scheduling possibilities that we could put out there for folks. And currently management, Matt and his team, they spend a lot of time on the corporate tasks that are TransDev related, do not benefit us, frankly, in any way. And they would be able to focus on strictly working with what we've got. And Cole touched on the office clerk, and I already talked about senior drivers, but we also have a driver scheduling software that we're implementing in the next couple of weeks that we're pretty excited about. And we're comparing it to what has been done in the past, which has been a lot of manual, well, actually all manual, I think. And we should have brought it to demonstrate what it looks like. Anyway, so we're anticipating some efficiencies there as well. And additional considerations that we've got there, I guess I don't really need to go through in detail, but the software, we have already purchased it, and it is in-house, and we're working with it, like I said. So when you look at the City of Fargo HR packages that they've got, I probably wasn't phrasing that correctly, but you look at if you're a full-time employee, 40 hours or more, your benefit rate is at that full level. When you look at schedules where folks work between 34 to 39.97 hours, the benefits are a little bit different. So anyway, looking at those and dropping the union restrictions and some of that, we are anticipating we can do more, or I should say do the same, with 1 to 2 fewer drivers than we currently have. And one of the considerations that we want to make sure is liability. With the insurance, the DERF, we talked about that last time. We did get a proposal from them where if drivers come in-house, our rates would not increase. If we stayed with a contractor, the rates would be increased by about $200,000 a year. So that's a consideration as well. And we did look at the retention that TransDev has for drivers. Right now, it's at 53%. We definitely feel that we can improve that. Not that it would take a lot to improve that, but we're thinking, and we know just being around for these periods of time and looking at the existing model of when we brought dispatchers from the contractor into the city. The increase in morale has been almost indescribable. It's very positive, and the drivers are the last step to get that, where we got a full team that everybody's on the same payroll, same team, same management. Everything is the same. It's not us versus them. We hear that a lot. So this would be a big improvement over that. So what did I miss, Cole? Is there more? Or Susan, you've been involved in this.
I think that's pretty much everything. The only other thing I wanted to include is on the next page. It's just kind of a breakout of all the costs that we looked at.
Oh, yes.
So you can see kind of how it's broken out between the supervisory staff, fixed route drivers, paratransit drivers, microtransit drivers versus what came in the driver services contract. So that is just a different way to look at it compared to how it's broken out per city in that previous page.
Yeah.
Julie, what I'm wondering about quantifying the non-tangential benefits, when you have your own people, you alluded to it with morale and things. I think that's really important to also identify the values that come with having your own workforce.
Oh, yeah.
Not just the numbers. Numbers,
Right.
I'm glad the numbers are coming out as good as they are. But we also have that human side of it. I don't know how we quantify that. But to me, that's really a big part of it, is to have people part of your culture.
Yeah.
Part of your family, part of your extended people. However we could measure that or remind people those benefits too.
Yeah, it's day to day. You hear things from, and our dispatchers that we brought on board are the best source of some of that. And just to hear how positive they feel things are working for the city. And I'm not trying to besmirch TransDev, man. But it just mentally knowing that you're part of that team, that, sometimes I don't like the word team, but you're part of that group. Everybody's on equal footing with who your employer is, and your paycheck reflects that. And it's that, I think there's more buy-in and more commitment when you are being recognized as a member of that group and you're a contracted employee.
I'll just say this, I've been with TransDev First Trans for 13 years, and that last year, your contractor, I was like, all right, are we gonna get this contract? Okay, where am I moving if we don't get this contract?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's a big.
And that's stressful, I moved to Fargo because we lost our contract in Minneapolis, and so it's been a blessing for me, but I'm just saying that it's stressful, and you have your management staff and your drivers like, what's next if we do lose this contract?
Yeah, that's a good point.
So,
thank you, Matt.
View from our point, I guess.
Yeah, that helps.
Another thing to recognize too is kind of long-term career growth for the drivers too. Because right now there's a handful of management positions within our local, section of TransDev, but with the city, potentially you could see futures outside of transit, whether it be in engineering or admin or anything like that. It could affect people. City also has some college opportunities for reimbursement for that. So another small benefit that currently I don't see.
Well, and I just think benefits overall, if you're trying to provide family benefits and $1,400 Is that the right amount? It's about 1,400 for a family policy.
Even a little more, actually.
You know, what are you, you're working for benefits,
You're-
so, you know, there's close, and it's not easy work. We don't need to get into all that, but it's, you know, what a relief it would be for them to understand that they will have those good benefits, and that worry is off the table. And you know, you are going to have a steady job doing the driving and management of the drivers. So.
And then just for reference, I don't know the exact number offhand, but the city of Fargo's family plan does cost about $460 per month for the individual.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions related to details in the proposal?
Curious too, is it Matt? You alluded to, the Twin Cities changing. What are the trends people where are they going more for their own? Are they going more toward contract services, or is it always just, state of flux?
It seems like in the Minneapolis, Twin Cities area, it's more, they're staying with contractors down there. But from what we're seeing as a trend, is that a lot of places are bringing it in-house as well. And you're seeing that a lot. So, you know, that's another thing where, you know, Transdev's trying to move people around because, right, they've lost these contracts.
Okay. I just want to make sure we keep moving along. So are there any other questions specific to the proposal or any of the details in here? If not, the motion before us is to authorize staff to bring this recommendation to the City of Fargo Budget Team Administration and City of Fargo Commission.
I'll take that one.
Okay, Commissioner Strand, is there a second?
A second.
Okay, thanks, Mike. Any further discussion? I think, Julie, before we vote on it, I think my only question would just, if you could just quickly remind everyone of the timeline now. I know we were a little bit behind, so tell us we know where it's going.
We do, yes. So we would take to the budget team, and Susan's probably got the schedule burned in her head, but I know our meeting is May 14th. So we would have to have everything pulled together and ready to present to them, and then take it from there. So after that.
Myself a note, I think we're gonna need to take it a little outside the budget process, because our budget doesn't get approved, you know, until the preliminary one isn't until August, finals isn't until October, so we can't wait on that. I think we need to bring it at a different, some sort of meeting,
Okay.
figure that out.
We still got time to, I know we were
Yes.
under a tight timeframe because but now that we've made this decision, at least we still have we have Transdev, the contract is through the end of the year.
Correct. Yes.
We need to formalize it with.
Okay.
Though before it's
Yeah.
official. So
Yes.
I would do that.
Yes.
Sooner rather than later.
Okay.
And we don't anticipate anything needing to come back to us at this point, right?
I don't foresee anything needing to come back.
Okay.
No.
Any further questions on the motion? If not, we'll ask for a roll call vote.
Bommelman,
Yes.
Flanagan,
Yes.
Griffith,
Yes.
Mastera,
Yes.
McDougal,
Yes.
Reeds,
Yes.
Scott,
Yes.
Stevens,
Yes.
Strand,
Yes.
Thompson,
Yes.
White.
Yes. Thank you. And now we'll move into our informational items. First one being 2026 budgetary efficiency.
Thank you. So this topic kind of goes hand in hand with the whole driver services thing. We're looking at our entire budget as a department for the city of Fargo's transit. With that, you know, we've come to you guys before and kind of explained the state of financial that we're in, as far as losing some federal funding back in 2023 by becoming a large urban provider. Lost about $600,000 for Fargo, $300,000 for Moorhead. Since then, there have been legislative efforts on the North Dakota side by both Julie and Senator Josh Boucher. Has been very good with local support. And that's garnered an additional $2 million over the next 2 years for the four large and small urban providers, being us, Bismarck, Minot, and Grand Forks. So that's helping to cover some of the budgetary deficit that we're seeing. Overall, for the city of Fargo, that's about a $5 million deficit. And while the city is able to cover a portion of that, We're still looking for budgetary efficiencies and ways to cut down a little bit. It's all pretty preliminary right now, but one thing that we looked at so far is reducing marketing expenses. It's at about $144,000 right now, and we, for the last 3 to 4 years, haven't hit nearly close to that. So expect that we can see about an additional like $60,000 or so reduction there. And then kind of taking a look at various line items. If there's any services that are duplicative that can be eliminated while still providing service to everybody in the local community, that's kind of the areas we'll be taking a look at. So like I said, pretty preliminary right now, but I just want to get it on everybody's radar, and we'll be bringing some recommendations to you guys for the next coordination committee.
Yeah, I had lots of questions, but I'll open it up for questions.
This $5 million projection include the potential savings if we go to in-house driving and save a couple, $2.5 million there? Or is that, this is the old format that's what we're looking at?
This would be the old.
So there's a conceivable savings that could really affect.
Impact them, yes.
Yes, I mean, the in-house savings is for next year, so this gap would have gotten bigger. The gap would have gotten bigger, so we don't want that. We want to make it smaller.
Right. That's good to highlight, though, that at least we're going that direction. And that'll have an impact positively.
Others? I have a few questions. One is I would like to have us have some more information about this $5 million deficit and the history of that. And so are we talking about to what extent is that a structural deficit? We have been adding to it every year. Was there, a big hit during COVID that we then carried forward? And I think if we're looking at corrections, it would be important to know that, because if it was $5 million, but since then we've been staying on budget, then we need to cover that. But that's a different than if we are every year coming up short. And so to be able to look at that. So
I can just talk in generality.
That'd be great.
Doing some history on it. So about 10 years ago, when I first started looking at this, the Fargo portion had a deficit of about $600,000, and that was paid for by the general fund. It was part of the general fund. That gap increased, so the subsidy that the city was paying through the general fund increased. The next several years, I think right before COVID, the most it was about $2.5 million. Then we had COVID and we're flush with CARES money. So for the next 4 years, and then we had some internal transition with our staff, like Jenica. And so, by the time that money ran out and we had a couple changes in contracts. We all know how hard it is to find drivers, and during COVID, it was even worse. And coming off of COVID, it was that high rate. So it was really a combination of the growing costs, and it was kind of, but that's when it all kind of came together. It was right at the end of COVID. So this volume of the deficit is new. There always has been a deficit. I mean, transit's not, we know that transit is not gonna generate money for anybody. It's just the size of the deficit has increased largely because of the cost of the labor. And so, the city's certainly willing to pay for some of the subsidy. We just can't continue at a $5.5 million deficit every year. So,
yeah. And so I'm going to break it down and just to help simplify it for somebody that is, I'm a sociology professor, although my bachelor's is in economics. So what I hear you saying, and I want to make sure I'm right about this. So every year we put together a budget, and then when we say, here's what we anticipate as our cost, then we determine the local shares of what every partner is going to pay to put into that. And then when I hear you say Fargo wasn't able to cover theirs is that what so they haven't been able to cover their local share?
No, I mean, we are.
Yeah.
We just can't continue at that level because it's a draw on other general fund needs.
Okay.
So yes, we're covering our local share.
Okay.
But we just can't, like I said, we can't continue at that pace. And I mean, the difference is like overall, like the transit loses about $10 million and it gets parceled out by the different cities based on that formula. Minnesota just has a lot more help from the state for their local monies. And unfortunately, we tried, we got a little, but not to the degree that we need to. So hopefully this study that we're doing for the next biennium will help us get a little more operating money as well. But in the meantime, you know, we need to kind of look at how we can tighten everything up a little bit.
So is one part, so when we determined the budgets every year, and then based on that, when we're trying to figure out how to cover the expenses for that budget, the amount allocated to Fargo has been beyond what Fargo can pay for? Like they've been they're not able to continue at that level. Okay. And have we been, and then we've also, in addition to that, been exceeding what we anticipated when we created the budget at the end of the year, our expenses were greater, or have we been, okay, so it's really just that in terms of we've been putting together budgets and then allocating it out, and the part that has been Fargo's share is beyond what Fargo can, and again, so based on state, okay.
Yes.
Yeah, we haven't gone over any budget that we
That's- okay.
forecasted. Yeah.
Because, I mean, for Fargo, you've been essentially subsidizing transit with general fund money or
Yes.
funds within the city, right?
Right.
Match that.
But it was not that you weren't subsidizing other partners, it was your share. Okay.
No.
And, but if we look at changes that impact all of the partners,
Yes.
then that is detrimental to all of the partners who have contributed to what we all determined was going to be the budget.
That's why we need to have good conversations with this upcoming budget.
Right. But if we look at cutting the budget, that also is detrimental. So if we say we're going to now drastically reduce ridership, that impacts all of us in our other communities, even though those other partners are still contributing at the same level, is what and that's again, that kind of goes back to Commissioner Strand, the point that I brought up before in terms of a leadership issue is that in terms of the partners, all of us together in this commitment to MATBUS, you know. So I'm happy to discuss efficiencies, but I want to make sure I'm clearly understanding this.
Right. And as we've been having these conversations, we've had some really good conversations and Megan and Jenica are involved. It's very clear that, you know, Julie and Cole and Jordan and we want to keep the level of service. It's like, how can we shift a route here or there to make it more efficient? If we look at, you know, we have 10 riders that go all the way down to 52nd Avenue. Maybe we don't need that leg of the route, or, you know, this particular route is costing us, you know, exponentially more than others. That's maybe not an efficient thing to do. So, you know, the idea is to keep the service the same as best we can, but trying to get other ways for efficiencies.
Deb, as I hear you, my brain's processing. You have partners.
Yes.
And your partnership has been adequately funded with your state support and local. You've been funding it adequately.
And which again, we understand it's a
And
vastly
we have
different situation.
The challenge of
Yes.
meeting the funding. And as we go forward, we're combined and we have a different combined picture. What I think I hear you saying, and appropriately so, is that we shouldn't be diminishing service on the Minnesota side. It's still reflective of income that's coming from Minnesota. Is that correct?
That is one part of it, but also acknowledging that when we cut services, even if you cut on the Fargo side, it impacts our Moorhead riders because
they're
part of that is they're using this, you know, joint transit system. So if I live in South Moorhead and I'm trying to get to my job at West Acres and now we've cut routes, that will impact. So it's that, you know, in terms of our joint commitment to providing a certain level of service. So, yeah, so I'm glad to hear that, you know, if we're looking at things that wouldn't reduce the quality of the service, that we should always be looking for efficiencies. But obviously that is a concern that if we do cut, even when we cut on the Fargo side, it will detrimentally impact folks that are riding from any of the adjoining communities.
I think part of what we're looking at that would benefit, well, everybody, is that we've got certain routes that, I'll just use Route 16, for example. That's a route that the trip generators on that particular route, it goes from downtown, goes down past the old high rise in Fargo, and then travels out to West Acres along 17th Avenue South. We currently, okay, the high rise is gone, and a lot of the riders that used to ride there have either picked up routes that serve close to the same area or simply aren't there anymore to use the system. So we're looking at if, and we have a meeting set up with West Fargo April 24 to discuss over the course of the last 4 or 5 years, they've expressed a lot of interest in increasing their service. So would it make sense to look at low, poor performing routes in Fargo or legs of those types of routes and shifting some of that to West Fargo? Would they be able to, jump on board, get service to their citizens out there or anyone using the system in that area and have some of that reallocation of costs and resources, still providing what would be better service for them and still continue to serve the same areas that we have. Maybe just not with duplicative service. So that's the kind of stuff we're trying to look at.
I think it would be helpful then if we, in the future, let's look at, just so we have a good sense of how much we need to, because again, we put this $5 million deficit in there, but it sounds, what does Fargo really need to, what are you thinking you're going to cut? That you're not able to cover how much? Is it 5 million every year?
I would like it to be half at least, that we would agree to not cover more than 2.5 million. Like kind of the pre-COVID numbers. So.
Okay.
So if we're able to do the driver services and have that impactful of a reduction in cost and make any adjustments that we need to, so Fargo's still committed to a local share of about 2.5 million. So you have to look at the $5 million deficit. Fargo's understands and is willing to put forward that amount of money. So we're talking about 2.5 million that we're going to have to work on, which the driver services will be a big impact on that.
So at the time when Fargo's allocation was 2.5 million, I'm assuming then the allocations for all of the other partners were less as well, right?
Yes.
So are we only looking at reducing Fargo's allocation, but not the others?
Well, if we look at the way that and again, not the finance wizard here, but if we look at the way that the formula is set up now versus what we did in the past, Moorhead kind of did their own thing. They had their own allocation. They have their own state money. And they, as far as locally goes, they have never put in more than, Jenica, how much?
I think before, this predates me, but I believe there was a time where we had some that was actually on the property tax levy.
Okay.
Where we used some, I would say maybe 150,000 or something like that. I mean, it wasn't a very large amount, but.
And currently your local contribution is, do you know? Maybe Megan would know.
It's CARES money.
Yeah, because we
Yeah.
have CARES in ARPA, so that's
Right.
kind of covering things right now.
Yeah.
Until that would expire and we use all that, then we would have
Some,
to figure out a plan. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's kind of why,
Talking about,
yeah, we've been talking about kind of looking out to the future a little bit,
Right.
right? For like when that money does expire and we use that, what's the state of our financial plan at that point in time.
Yeah.
I guess some of this too is if we're looking at, so we have a current way of allocating what each local share, and this would change that, and it would make the share for Fargo significantly less than what it is right now. So by that means then if everybody else is, they're paying a larger share of the budget.
well, I mean, the idea is to decrease all costs. So, the shares are allocated based on many different factors,
Mhm.
miles, routes. So that's why it's important that we start working on this budget early so we can look at those implications. It's not like it's our intent to shift all of that expense to someone else. It's to reduce the expense overall and have it
Mhm.
basically trickle
But
down in a different fashion.
Still keep the same quality of service.
Yes.
Not cutting routes.
Yes. Yes.
I want to see that. So, yeah, okay. I think this is a good start
Yeah.
to the conversation. So, and then a couple of questions I had with the money that I would appreciate, it's now Senator Boucher, right?
Yes.
Yes, I almost said, Representative Boucher, work on, allocating some more money for transit. But Julie, I know I asked you this and if you could just share that information. So of that 2 million, what do we anticipate would be the allocation for Fargo?
Based on lots of discussions and, the bottom line, it's a $2 million one-time allocation for this biennium. So in 25 and 26, we would receive, Fargo would receive, it'd be a little over, do you remember the exact amount? It's like,
For 25.
yeah,
Okay,
400
Per year.
per year.
okay.
And then hopefully the legislature will approve, funding a study so that we can help identify what would be more of a long-term dedicated source of funding.
Mhm. And for that money, because it does cement, you mentioned the study, is some of that money required to go towards this study?
No.
Okay, so
That
they have
would be
additional
separate.
funding?
Correct.
All right, so the 425, and that is meant to cover the $600,000 gap in federal funding. So it's not enough to cover the gap that North Dakota has in federal funding, but Minnesota's is covered. We're,
Yes.
again,
Yeah, you
thankful
guys-
that
yeah.
it's one of those, yeah. In this case, a good thing to be thankful.
Yeah, well, yeah, and
Okay,
we
so that is.
we
Mhm,
would love to see a bigger commitment on the North Dakota side.
mhm.
But I know a lot of the legislative discussions we've had, and Susan and Ian and I have been in on all those talks is,
Mhm.
with the property tax proposals and different things that they're talking about, prairie dog funds and
Mhm.
impacts that all of that, those adjustments this legislature's looking at. Its funding is a little short, I think, in some cases.
Other questions in particular, as we are moving forward, this is obviously some, important conversation and we want to get more information. What kinds of information would people like to see? What questions do you have that we could have staff work on for a future meeting? Anything? Okay, staff, do you have any questions for us?
No, I think just so I'm clear, if we bring forward more details on dollar wise, what we're looking at, any type of impact and how it ripples throughout the partnerships. You want more details on that. Okay, we can do that. We have that. It's just.
Oh, we do have a question.
That's great.
Yes, thank you. So I know we're at 5 million today, 2.5 million, 10 years ago. Are we, and I know we're targeting this $5 million number, is that looking too short term? Do we need to be thinking about the long-term impacts? We should always be looking for efficiencies in our system, whether we have a deficit doing well or otherwise. So I'm just curious if we're thinking about the long-term impacts, if we're going to get money from the state and then in a year or two, we're back here to this $5 million number again, having the same conversation. We've already made all the cuts that we can make. And I was just more so a question about the long-term financial forecast of MATBUS. Some of those things are up in the air right now with this transition over to the Fargo system here. So I understand that, but I just wanted to raise that question or just that thought as we continue on with these conversations.
The answer to that would be yes. Yeah, we're definitely looking at the long term.
Yeah.
We don't want to be facing this on a regular sustained basis. So our hope, of course, going to legislature was to get something beyond the biennium, but that wasn't possible. So the hope is the study, at least on the North Dakota side, will help us identify something along those lines. We have asked about mills because in North Dakota, the way that the century code is written, public transit is eligible for up to 5 mills. But that still has to be approved and brought forward and voted in and stuff. And it's interesting how every city does something different for the.
Yeah, every city, every state's goofy and different.
And yeah,
Totally understandable.
You got it.
Yeah, I mean, really,
There's a lot.
yeah, what this comes down to is just really trying to get the state support for this.
Well,
Right?
when you think about it, I mean, the revenues are flat.
Yeah,
We haven't- I mean,
exactly. We're doing.
This item on the agenda is rates, and we haven't raised those for 2009. State aid is flat and the grants are flat.
Yeah,
Meanwhile, our expenses are just.
yeah, and that's what you hate about all this. It's like, we're doing everything well. It's not like you're coming in over
Right.
budget every year or anything, so.
It's
Anyway, that's all I had. Thank you.
Yes.
I think maybe to add on, and it might go to what you're asking about, Peyton, is that we also have Senator Boucher looking to see if it's possible to identify some funds that would help offset or defray some of our local match that's required for capital. So he's working diligently on that still in this legislative session to try and identify some of those, and everything helps, so if we don't have to come up with local share on some of the buses, and the state is willing to help us with that, that helps overall everything. So, yeah, we're digging up everything possible, but yeah.
Well, and that would be good to see. And so, as we're going forward is some of those projections. Of
Sure.
what we anticipate as our expenses over the next few years. So,
Okay.
great. Great. Anything else? John, did you have something?
Fine, thank you.
Okay. All right, then let's move on to our next informational item, which is potential fare increase and fare structure.
Thank you, Madam Chair. What we have talked about, and frankly, when I was out at the legislature this past session or current session, there was a lot of questions from the legislators on why don't you just raise fares? Why? A lot easier said than done as far as the impact on the people that are using the system, very likely are the least that could afford something like that. But we did say we would take a look at it. I will point out Grand Forks did do a fare increase. That's that highlight in yellow there. And that just went into effect last week. And what we're looking at, I talked to my counterpart up there yesterday. They don't have any data yet. Of course, it's only been a week, but we will be following along there to see if the impact to ridership is what the industry trend demonstrates, or if it's something completely different. Other than that, we thought by laying out a comparison to the other cities that we often use in our comparisons, at least for transit, like St. Cloud, Mankato, Rochester, Bismarck, and lay out their fare structure right there next to it, it would help everybody get a snapshot of what Fargo/Moorhead, West Fargo, and Dilworth currently, what the rates are, and what we look like in comparison to existing systems throughout the area. So one of the proposals is, and we want to have a discussion with this group about, is it something that we would want to propose an increase in fares? Would we want to propose an increase maybe just in the cash fare? We have done that in the past. And then, so historically, what we have done is the last time we increased fares as far as in our area here for cash fares was in 2009. And then we increased fares for passes in 2012, and then again in 2020 when we implemented our fare budget system. So not significant increases, but incrementally small ones. One other consideration is and it's federal law, under ADA. If you have a fixed route adult fare, you can only charge double that fare for your paratransit service. So if our cash fare is $1.50, we can, and currently do, charge $3 for a paratransit trip. If it goes to $2, that would change paratransit to be a $4 trip. Paratransit is a very expensive service to provide. Again, you know, no judgment on who's using it, but it would very likely impact people that can least afford a change. So of note, Senior Ride here in the area, they are increasing their fares to $4 per ride effective July 1 of this year. And in the past, the whole time I've been here, we've tried to coordinate any fare changes because some of their riders are eligible to take paratransit and vice versa. And we accept each other's fare media on each of the systems. So it just makes it easier for the riders to be able to pay the same fare across the system. So what we're proposing, and Luke did a nice analysis, that's your handout, as well as what's in the packet. So Luke did an analysis on if we increase fares, what percentage we could anticipate based on system metrics that, that are well established. That's what's outlined here in the memo as well. How the impact of a fare increase is on your ridership. You can anticipate, say, a 10% reduction in ridership, but then if you're charging more for your fares, well, how does that come out? So I think what I'll do, Luke, is have you explain the handout in a little more detail so everybody has a clear understanding of it.
Sure, if you look at the top table there, that's the fixed route fares we gathered for 2024. So I broke out all the fares we gathered, which includes transfers and stuff. So I took that out, took out the free fares. We have our half price fares and full fares that we gathered. Times that by the cost, 75 cents for a half fare and $1.50 for a full fare. And the records there on the right. So if we increased our fares by 33% up to $2 or $1 for the half price fare, we could expect to see a 10 to 15% drop in ridership. So the second table down there is the revenue we can expect with a 10% ridership reduction. So it would increase by roughly 190,000. The third table is the fares we can expect with a 15% ridership reduction to kind of give us a little range there. And the difference would be an additional 130,000. That's just on fixed routes. And the same below for paratransit, the first blue table there, we had 60,436 fares in 2024. If we lost 10% of our ridership, but increased our fares there, we could expect to see a $36,000 increase in revenue. And if we lost 15%, we could expect to see that bottom table there, $24,000 increase.
So the translation is, even if we increase fares, the revenue offset and loss in ridership would not be significant. And it's not a decision we want to make. We want to have a discussion here, get your input, your thoughts, what you want to do. But we want to make sure we have that.
Questions, comments? Jenica?
Do you know, like the loss in ridership, that's what I would have affected federal funding?
It would impact the federal funding. Yeah, we can figure that out as well. But when you look at what goes into our formula now, as far as how they calculate our federal dollars, our 5307 money, it's based on a couple of factors. I think it's 5 different factors, but it includes revenue miles, passenger trip miles and things like that that get figured out. So calculating how it would impact the federal revenue. That'd be something we could do.
And then
Throw that in
also-
there.
And then also just the allocation, obviously, to the different
Right.
entities, depending on where that ridership loss comes from, I guess.
And if I'm reading, so right now, we're looking at somewhere just in ridership for that full price, somewhere in the loss of 50,000 to 80,000 in fares. That's it. So I think that's my concern is that, we are bringing some revenue, but we know that we will lose riders and I appreciate that we have information in here about the elasticity and the evidence shows that smaller cities have greater elasticity than larger cities. Because people have more options. And so, we could see an even greater loss. And especially right now is a very volatile time in public transit that we are seeing in places when you don't, I've mentioned this before, you look at the Twin Cities where they've got things where people just, they don't ride them anymore. They're not riding the buses, they're not riding the light rail. And we know that more riders lead to more riders, So, but the opposite can happen too. If people just see, they're like, oh, one is they get nervous. They don't see many people on it. It's also a social norming thing. And so we risk feeding into that cycle of, so I would say one thing I noticed is that while our, if we were to raise something like this, another thing to consider would be to lower our monthly rate, because we're towards the high end for that, our monthly pass, because what you want to do is encourage people to ride more often. And we have we're second highest of all of there's a few that are at $42 and then only St. Cloud is more expensive for their monthly rate. And looking at things that would get people riding more often and offset that, if you were to, create disincentives for the one time and instead, and push people more towards those passes that would get them to do it more often. I'll just say I was also surprised that I think it is important to simplify, but I was surprised we don't do a weekly pass, whereas others do, because I think that's one, too, if you look particularly at some of the more comparable in size cities, they do a weekly pass, and that, as somebody who, when I travel places, if I'm, in a new city, I'll get a weekly pass to get around. I'm not going to do a monthly, but something like that, we might actually in a city of our size, as opposed to say like Minot, Fargo might be able to have something like that that could be successful. And again, it would get people riding more often.
I think in relation to that, when we brought in our new fare box system in 2021 timeframe, we put in this, what I would call a little bit more complicated fare structure and having a weekly pass. I know we discussed it at the time. I can't remember why we went with the 2-week pass, but fare capping is a feature of that new system that got introduced that people struggle with. And the idea was that you would pay a flat rate of the $42, or if it's discounted, 21. And then that would get you, it's too confusing. I'm sorry. But anyway, so we were thinking simplification might help. Go back to the 30-day passes. Look at if we want to implement a weekly pass, what that would be. And we can recalculate some of this stuff to look at that. But if we uncomplicate things, I think that would help with people utilizing the system too. That's my thought. Cole and Luke, you guys work with that, and Matt, you see people day to day that are giving input on the system's structure for fares.
Yeah, I think that while we introduced the new Connect system and fare capping, all that was good in theory, but it is very difficult to explain to passengers how that works exactly. Get passengers coming in and then asking if they put on, $27, is that gonna make it so they're good till the end of the month? And then we have to explain, well, it depends on when you buy it and when your fare capping takes effect and all that. So I think that just going back to, yeah, you pay $27, you're good from the first day you use it for 31 days, makes it nice and simple for them, so they know exactly when they're gonna run out, and it's more consistency.
I do like with the Connect is that before, if you bought a 30-day pass, you didn't use it at all, you lost that money. But now you actually, that money stays on there until you use it.
Oh,
So that's one benefit. And then there's also the fare capping is that no one pays more than $3 a day, no matter how much they ride. So there are some, benefits, but I agree with Julie that overall it's fairly complicated, and I think there's a lot of confusion about that.
Well, one of the articles I read or pieces of documentation I read during the legislative session and we talked about was when you increase fares, there is that potential where and we're not saying it's set in stone, but very likely the trend is that ridership will go down and it will impact the federal funding. And you get into this spiral where you're going to have to stabilize it at some point.
Mhm.
And so I definitely think it's worth exploring. Is there some proposal that we can bring forward that is going to impact the least amount of people and benefit the system, but not get less revenue and potentially improve?
So Julie, if you really accelerate the growth, the number of riders, federal funding goes up accordingly.
Yes.
And it's not a reimbursement based on its numbers. So are there, who's gone to free fares out there and how's it working for them? Will they end up just getting a mountain of federal funds to compensate for the loss of income?
No, that's not what has happened, but I actually have looked at a lot of the systems that have gone to the fare free. Many of them started it during the COVID period when there was funding. And most of them have gone back to charging fares. They discovered that the fare free had more negative impacts than they anticipated. Some security issues and
sort of a get what you pay for kind of thing.
yeah, and it just, so I can bring that information certainly forward. But as far as how it impacts.
We're not there.
Yeah, but how it impacted us was we had to absorb more cost in higher security rates. It was not a positive experience for us. And so as far as how that impacts federal funding, I'm not sure with these agencies how that impacted their funding. I think they tried it because they had the COVID dollars. But that is a good question. I don't have the answer to that or haven't seen anything on that, but I can see if I can find it.
And this notion that you can fly, you can ride unlimited for $3 a day, that's a real marketing tool.
Yeah.
Message to tell people $3 you can go all day long, wherever you want,
Yeah.
I don't know that well, anyway.
Other questions or information that you'd like to see in the future?
I just had a question. We saw that there's with the fare increases, but there's a decrease in ridership. Do we know if the ridership came back after a certain period of time?
That's my question.
Because because that would affect, I think, someone's decision.
Right. I was thinking exactly those same things. It's certainly you understand there's some sort of initial reaction, but ultimately people that need transit are gonna, come back, I would think, at least some portion.
I think that we experienced that where it was an initial dip and it did trend back up after you're right, after a couple of years.
Just from my own perspective, I'm more likely to ride the bus for $2 than $1.50 because I don't carry change anymore.
Yeah, that is actually a very valid point. People like to not have that extra change that they have to have. Yeah, yeah.
And really, what hasn't had a price increase since 2009? I mean, our expenses have gone up exponentially.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's how, Grand Forks took a hard look at should we or shouldn't we? And the only input they received was all along the lines of we support increase.
I think that's really interesting. Like we
Yeah.
asked that, how much negativity did you get at your hearing? And they said none.
Yeah.
Everyone was very understanding. Whether that happens here, it's probably not the same thing, but we can make the case, I think.
I guess my personal thought is like, I would be surprised to see a 10 or 15% dip in paratransit ridership.
Yeah, I think there'd be less of an effect on para, because if you ride para, you need para.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But you have to, standing back and looking at the cost of a trip on paratransit, when you throw everything in and, subsidies and everything, the fare itself is offsetting maybe 6% of the actual cost of a trip. And it has, the way the federal guidelines are is if you have a fixed route in place, you have to have complementary paratransit within a 3/4 mile corridor of that fixed route. If you provide service outside that 3/4 mile corridor, then you can charge more. If that's the decision. But you also have to think here, we do it within city limits. So every time city limits expand or there's some extraterritorial land that's brought in or anything, that opens up paratransit would be able to provide trips within that area. And you can go from, and we have riders that do it, you can go from out in the Walmart out in Dilworth is very popular. And so folks will go from there all the way to West Fargo. It's $3 no matter if you go across the street or if you go that distance, it's the same. So it's a great service. It's necessary. I don't want to give any negative input regarding it. But it's individually booked trips that are provided individually, and driver services are provided where they help the passengers, but it is an expensive service. And the trend is we are seeing, and I in our industry, and I think others, you hear this silver tsunami that's coming from the baby boomers that are now transitioning into not being able to drive or driving less or using services like paratransit. And it's only increasing. And that's the trend we see with our ridership, is that paratransit continues to climb.
Well, and if senior ride increases their fares we're going to see an increase potentially on
Yes.
para.
Yeah.
Because they're going to jump.
They'll shift. Yes. Good point. Thank you, Sean.
Yeah.
Say that again. What did you say?
If senior ride increases their fares to $4 in July,
Oh, okay.
then we'll probably see more.
If we do not, if we don't match.
Right, we're still at.
Okay.
I want to be mindful of time. I know we're over,
Yes.
so if there's nothing else, then we'll move on to item C, safety and security.
So don't have a whole lot to cover today, unfortunately, with all the things with budget and bringing drivers in the house. That's kind of where our attention's been at. But since the last time that we met, we do have a new security guard that's on staff for DTC. You'll see significantly fewer incidents. So that guard is very good at de-escalating issues and being able to kind of persuade people off property instead of having to call any police or emergency services. So some positive news there.
Excellent.
I was surprised at how I was like, did I miss it?
Sarah Page was in here.
Okay, Luke, do you want to finish this up talking about the?
Do a quick ridership update for the first quarter of 2025 compared to the first quarter of 2024. So Route 1 in Moorhead that serves 5th Street and 8th Street down to the Marriott, back downtown. Little bit of reduction, down 13%. Route 2, which serves Moorhead on 11th Street and 14th Street mainly, up 3%. Route 3, which serves Moorhead, it goes between the Cashwise down by 94 up to Target, or from Marriott up to Cashwise at Target. That's up 23%. Route 4, which runs from the GTC to the Dilworth Walmart and services North Moorhead, is down 3%. Route 5, which services Moorhead South of 94, is up 20%. Dilworth ridership up 27% on Route 6 that goes east and west in Dilworth. Connect to Route 4 at the Walmart. Route 9 in Moorhead services that 34th Street corridor is down 14%. Route 11 in Fargo, which does the Broadway north and south of the VA, up 30%. Route 13 services Fargo, North Fargo on University 10th and Broadway, up 38%. Route 14, which services Fargo on University Drive, 32nd Avenue and up 42nd Street to West Acres, up 14%. Route 15, our most popular route, pretty level, up 5%. That goes between GTC and West Acres and Walmart down on 13th Avenue. Route 16, up a little bit, 5%. That goes down to 17th Avenue South over to West Acres. Route 17, which services a New Life Center and the Madison Elementary School area, is up 5%. Route 18, which services Southeast Human Services, the Essential Hospital, and 52nd Walmart, down 1%. Route 20, which services West Fargo, Cass County Jail, West Acres, up 7%. Route 24, which services West Acres, Sanford Health, and the portions of West Fargo, is up 4%. Link FM, down 92%. We don't have a lot of events in the first quarter. I think we had 2 events. One of them had 0 rides and one of them had 8. So a little rough there, but that's why it's going away. Fargo Industrial Park On Demand, which takes people from West Acres or Whale of a Wash on 12th Avenue North to the Industrial Park. And at that on-demand zone, up 8%. Route 31 services NDSU, Albrecht Avenue and 18th Street and University Village, up 173%. Ridership shifted to 31 because the Route 32 was canceled last fall. So seeing a lot of ridership shift over that direction. Route 33, which services NDSU campus and downtown campus, Berry Hall and Clay Hall, is down 23%. Route 34, which services Albrecht Avenue or Boulevard, NDSCS and University Drive, is down 11. NDSU On Demand up 19%. They added an morning on demand service just for the first quarter of this year to replace some of the missing service from Route 33. So that kind of explains the increase there. Overall, Moorhead's up and Dilworth routes are up 3%. Fargo, West Fargo, and NDSU routes up 4%. System-wide, we're up 4%. Paratransit up 6% for this quarter. On the next page, we have UPass ridership. NDSU's been having an issue with their new student IDs, so they've had kind of an issue with reporting numbers. So I think that kind of explains the decrease there. It's down 21%. MSUM's up 26%. Concordia is down 22%, and M-State's down 47%. Are you looking at them? Yeah, sorry.
These were, okay.
Yeah.
I thought the slideshow got updated, but maybe not. And so if you have.
So the numbers that are posted on the screen are the correct ones.
Okay.
I think the originals, so like a slideshow that got sent out was wrong. Any questions on ridership for the first quarter?
Any idea why M-State would be down? They're usually. And then just curious.
I want to say I think this is from conversations last year when Lori was still here looking at the UPass agreement with them. But they had some students that were utilizing the service that technically didn't qualify because they weren't qualifying.
Oh,
So I think that's what the issue is.
oh, okay.
It sounds familiar.
Hmm.
That would impact it. Yeah, I understand.
So they still use the service, they're just not registered as UPass, they just are a different rider or.
Potentially, yeah.
Any questions? Okay, then I did not look up the date for our next meeting. When's our next meeting?
21st.
21st?
I think it is.
Is there any other businesses before us? No, we are adjourned. Thanks, everybody.